Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of Conversations. I'm your host, Drew Patrick, and today we have joining us a fantastic saxophonist in his own right and a professor here at Mansfield University, Dr. Joseph Murphy. Dr. Murphy, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for the invitation.
So, I want to start with every musician that I've talked to, there is a reason they have fallen in love with their instrument. What was the reason that you fell in love with the saxophone?
Well, let's see. In fourth grade, we got to try out all families of instruments. We spent a quarter of the year doing strings and a quarter of the year doing percussion, which they also included piano and that. And anyway, so we got to try all the different instruments. It wasn't necessarily the trying out that intrigued me. It was actually the look of the saxophone. You know, a kind of a really curved instrument and lots of buttons, and it looked really complicated. And, you know, as I reflect on it, it was truly an instrument of the Industrial Revolution. You know, it's hard to make an instrument like that prior to the Industrial Revolution. So I think it was mainly the visual aspect of the instrument that intrigued me in fourth grade, and then I started it in earnest in fifth grade.
Yeah, and then, hey, turned out pretty good for you there, falling in love with the shape, and then able to make beautiful sounds out of it. That is always fantastic. So you've had quite the illustrious career too, playing-wise. You've been able to play over in Europe. You've been able to be on a couple of, have a pretty decent discography. Mm-hmm. I want to go and talk about what was it like to go and play like over in Europe and in Asia and these places?
Well, a lot of those contacts in Europe were from when I studied there. I spent 1 year in Bordeaux, France, studying with a famous saxophonist there. So I made a lot of connections there and then just got invited back periodically. Also, it's because of this organization that I belong to. The national organization is called the North American Saxophone Alliance, or the other NASA. And there's also kind of a global partner to that called the World Saxophone Congress. And the World Saxophone Congress has a meeting every 3 years. So I almost always go to that. So that's mainly what has taken me to the Asian concerts, although I've done some others also, but mainly from contacts from those professional organizations.
How important are those contacts, especially in the music world, and to be able to have someone who knows the quality of work and the quality of music that you can produce? How important are those contacts?
Yeah, those contacts are incredibly important. And we've been able to host them here. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship that they invite me there and I can invite them here. And so that's win-win for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I also want to talk about, because I'm very intrigued by it, just the process of recording and the process of getting your music out there. What is that process like for you, or has it been for you to get your music out in the public?
Well, it started out as, you know, when you perform some pieces, I use a phrase a lot in my teaching that there are some things that you can only learn through performance. And then kind of a related phrase, I often say there are some things you can only learn when you do a recording session. So it started out as basically just kind of a very intense practice session, just seeing how perfect we can get the recording session. And then when you have enough pieces recorded, then you say, "Whoa, I guess we could publish a CD." And primarily, or at least initially, it was mainly to send to other concert venues. It's kind of like a calling card. Here's my CD. Hopefully you can invite us for a concert. So you need a CD to send out to people. And it has never been a money-making situation. But recently, within the last 5 or 10 years, where you can put your CD on CD Baby and iTunes and all different venues. It's pretty easy, and you get 40 cents for each one or something, and so it makes a little bit of money. But like I said, it started out as mainly just a very expensive practice session, turned into kind of a calling card. And then it just has evolved into several CDs.
I think the saxophone, too, is a very versatile instrument in terms of it can play in multiple different styles of music. Is there a style of music that you prefer when you're playing, or are you just open to whatever?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a style. What I prefer to do is work with composers. Okay. I've probably premiered, a little over 100 pieces. Probably more than half of those, definitely more than half of those, probably about 60 of those are with a guitarist that I play with. So rather than a style, we like to work with composers, and those composers compose in many different styles. So that's my preference, is to play new works by composers that I work with.
So is that because of you like that working with someone aspect of it, or is it just you want to see what is new and interesting that they're going to come up with?
Yeah, both. To work with somebody new, to help them promote their pieces, and also to promote their evolution of composition. So yeah, it's both, really.
Hey, I mean, I find if you get that opportunity to work, go for it. Absolutely. I want to also switch because, okay, I have not done music since my high school days. I was as one would call a band geek. But I didn't have the talent to go to the next level, and I knew it at the time. But the reason I bring this up is because in high school, we've noticed a stretch of personalities that go with specific instruments, and I want to read some of the ones for saxophone that I found, and I want you to either confirm or deny that these are actual personality traits from either other saxophonists you work with or some of your students.
Oh, okay.
So bear with me here. Quiet, but some of the most talented people in the band.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sorry to refute that, but if you were interviewing a flutist, I could see that same description. If you were interviewing a, French hornist, or even maybe a trombonist, so I don't know. I don't think that's specific to saxophone, no.
All right. Well, on the other side of that, we have another person who says saxophone crazy. Peaceful, but used to playing jazz, which I don't know if I agree with that one. And then always willing to throw a section party in the middle of rehearsal. They're sharp as a knife, but they're upset that there isn't more orchestral repertoire that requires saxophone.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
Let's see. Generally the party section at our band.
Well, like I said before, that could be trumpets, that could be drummers, so.
So, do you find though these stereotypes, like you've seen some of them true, or when you get to the level that you teach at here at college, that everyone's pretty much the same because they're focused on what they want to do? Do you still get those stereotypes occasionally?
No, I don't think I have stereotypes. No, no.
Which is a good thing, though,
Yeah,
right? To not have stereotypes with your students. I found that funny because that was always something we had talked about. Because I played trumpet, and the trumpet stereotype is like the
Yeah,
ego-driven crazy person. And at times in high school, I could definitely be that. So that's why I was curious.
Sure.
So speaking of teaching, there's with people who teach music, there are very different styles of how you can teach music. What do you feel your style, or how would you define the style of teaching that you do?
There's several ways I could answer this. I guess one way I could answer it is I don't teach the student how to play this piece. I teach a student how to practice. Okay. And the piece is just the vehicle to teach that practicing. Mm-hmm. So another way I could answer it is to make progress, you need to know three things: where you are, where you want to get to, and a million increments how to get there. So again, that's my job as a teacher, to kind of show them, either through my own playing or recordings or something, where they're shooting for, where the goal is. And my job to teach them the million increments of how to get where they are to where they want to be. And once I show them the goal and the million increments, then they realize, oh yeah, this is where I'm at. I don't start out saying this is where you're at, because it sounds kind of demeaning. So I show them the end result and the increments to get there, and then they hopefully realize where they're at.
So with that, when a student is, say, struggling to find those increments, what is your best piece of advice to them in terms of to try and get it? And if they get frustrated, because at times you can get extremely frustrated, what is your advice to those students who struggle at times to try and get there, to help them get back on track?
Again, there's often several answers to any of your questions. One answer to that would be talk to the seniors, talk to the students in the studio that you respect, and they'll give you some good advice.
I want to go back quickly to something you said earlier, the sometimes it's best to learn from a performance. So I just want to talk about that a little bit, like in terms of what things are best to learn performance and what things are best to learn in a practice session. Where is the difference between those, or is there a difference between those?
Oh, well, performances are so seldom. It's not like any of these students are performing once a week. So sometimes these students are just performing, at the end of the semester or maybe in the middle of the semester. So almost all of their playing is in a practice session. And then when they do play that, perform solo that couple times in a semester, I think it's very important for them to immediately after that performance kind of debrief themselves and, say, what did I learn from this that I wasn't even thinking about in the practice session? That's kind of what I meant about there are some things you can only learn in a performance. It's almost impossible to recreate a performance situation in the practice room.
Yeah, that atmosphere is
I guess the closest thing might be maybe bring in a friend and play for them in the practice room, or maybe turn on a recorder and listen to your practice session, something like that.
What is and when you're teaching, what is the most rewarding part of being a teacher of music here at Mansfield?
I guess the most rewarding part is obviously seeing a student make progress, and not always even the best student, realizing their potential, but taking the middle student and really seeing them blossom is to me is quite rewarding.
And just really to be able to see improvement. I agree. I think like in terms of seeing the improvement day one to when they finish.
One thing that I say a lot in my teaching is the most important decision you can make in a practice session is to plan your next session. So something I always say in a lesson is, okay, so based on how you just played that, how do you think you're going to practice this in your next session? And sometimes, a freshman really has no idea, so I have to give them, some options of what do you think is going to be most valuable in your next session. But it's very rewarding when they become a junior or a senior. Before I ask that question, I'll write on a piece of paper so they can't see it what I think they should do in the next session.
Okay.
And then invariably, as a senior or maybe even a junior, they'll say the exact same thing that I wrote down. So they kind of have drank the Kool-Aid of, being in touch with how well they played it and exactly how they should practice it next.
And is that an easy switch, do you think, for your students to flip that? Just practicing and working with you and learning as it goes along, that's an easier switch for them to be like, or to recognize what they need to do in the next practice?
Yeah, that's part of the maturing, and almost always happens.
So in talking about that, what are the specific steps or what are the specific things you start to notice in the maturity of a performer that are the specific steps that that they're on the right track?
Well, that sometimes they are pickier with their playing than I am. So that's usually a good mark that I can notice. Like, when they finish playing a section and I'll say, okay, what are your remarks? What do you remark from that? And they'll usually say things that I would have said, and then sometimes even more critical than I would have been.
Is that is that a good feeling though? Like for you as a teacher to watch someone criticize them more than you would, or is that sometimes you got to be like, or you got to? I don't want to say talk them off the ledge because I don't think that's the right words for it, but sometimes be like, all right, let's pause here.
Yeah, you don't want them to be so critical of themselves that they're kind of paralyzed or demoralized. But that usually doesn't happen. Usually, when we focus on, okay, what's next? What are you going to do in your next session? And, so that the next session can be a productive session. We're always looking for a productive practice session. So if you focus on that rather than perfection now.
And occasionally I'm sure you've run into the student who wants perfection now. So I think we talked about this a little bit, but like for those students who want perfection and are hard on themselves or harder on themselves than they should be, how do you go about continuing to motivate that type of student, or a student who sometimes is overly critical of themselves?
Oh, it really depends on the personality. Sometimes it's good to get them out and performing as much as possible in our master class, on our student recital hour. And so it really depends on the student, but often just getting them out to perform and realizing that, performance is almost a conversation with the audience rather than just always being in your practice room alone.
Mm-hmm. Do you find students to like practicing with a group more or by themselves more? Which setting do you think they get more out of?
Well, it kind of depends on the group. Like if you're talking a large band situation where you actually have a conductor, that's very different than a group like in saxophone. A common group is a quartet, 4 members. So if we compare solo playing, solo practicing versus quartet, they're a very different dynamic. I'd say, it really depends on the student. I have some students that prefer the solo practice, and some prefer the interaction of quartet playing because it's a lot more complex and they don't have a conductor. Typically in our quartets, I will meet with them once a week and they will meet on their own once a week. So without me, they really understand the dynamics of a group of 4 and who's taking the lead, and everybody needs to contribute and everybody needs to show up on time prepared and all that other stuff. Sometimes that's harder than solo playing, but I think it's as rewarding.
I was going to say with quartet play too, it's, and I feel like my last couple of questions have been negative, and I didn't mean this to happen, but like with a quartet, sometimes all four have to be on the same page, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So have you found that students, though, especially in that quartet setting, have been more helpful to each other if they see someone struggling?
Yeah, I mean, it's my job to put 4 people together who I think are close in talent and personalities, but then, it's kind of their job to discover, okay, how do they need to help this person? How do I fit in the leadership of this group? How do I fit in musically in this group? And that almost always happens.
That's good. That able to lead and then sit back and let the students really take control there. So you've been here at Mansfield since 1987.
Yep.
What has been the biggest changes you've seen in just the way you teach or the technology used? What have been the biggest changes you've seen from when you first got here to now?
Well, actually, when I first got here, we didn't have computers on every desk. We didn't have emails. So a lot has been technology. And then because of the technology and the use of it, I guess I've had to, I think I need to be very redundant in my teaching. I need to send reminders all the time. It's not that the students are purposely forgetting things, but I need to be very, very redundant, and some teachers might say, okay, you're just babying them, but I want them to do the work, and if it takes redundancy, then so be it.
Fair enough there with redundancy. Technology, though, too, has also probably helped because it's now, easier to record and easier to be able to listen back to yourself.
Exactly. They can have their tuner on their phone, their metronome on their phone, their recorder on their phone. They can listen to pretty much any piece on YouTube. Yeah. It's very helpful.
I was gonna say exactly that. That how much help does that aspect that they can have all these tools directly in their pocket at sometimes
Exactly.
for you, especially when they're practicing on their own and they see something and maybe come to you and be like, hey, can you listen to this for me? To be able to have that, does that make your job a lot easier?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
So the other thing since 1987 that I want to talk about is I want to go back in time, back to 1987 for you specifically. Looking here at Mansfield, what was it? Not to go back to like your resume and your interview for the job, but what was it about here in Mansfield that ultimately, first of all, made you pick to want to teach here, and then what's kept you here?
Oh, let's see. Well, as in most college jobs, there are not a whole lot of good college jobs. So I got the interview, I got the offer, and I definitely accepted because it was a great job. It's not like I had 4 or 5 to choose from. I mean, I was 26 years old. So when you ask what made me move here or choose this job or attracted me to it, is basically the job and the job offer at 26, and you accept what you take. But then the next part of the question, what kept me here, is I have great colleagues. It's a beautiful area, great place to raise a family. I love my students. They're very, the typical Mansfield student profile is very unassuming, willing to work. So all those things attracted and kept me at Mansfield.
So during visits and when students are visiting, have you had the opportunity to be able to talk to some of like prospective college students?
Oh, definitely.
And then what is your I don't want to say pitch, but what is your pitch to them, or what are the things you say you guys can offer as a music department here at Mansfield?
Well, I say several things. I highlight, especially music, how music is a pretty sizable portion of the university. A much larger percentage of the university than like at Penn State or other, no matter where I walk on campus, I'll always run into music majors, even when everybody is here, and not home for COVID. So that's one thing that I always pitch. Let's see. Another thing that I always pitch is that the faculty are here in Butler many more hours than what they're contracted for. I mean, you go to Westchester, and they'll get some very good teachers, coming from Philadelphia Orchestra or wherever, but they really only come in for their however many hours they teach, and then they go home. But you go up to Butler right now, and I bet there's many faculty who are working in their office and are available to students to walk in with questions, and we're here many more hours than our contracted teaching hours. So a residential faculty.
How important is that, though, the availability, too, for a prospective student when you say that to them and you see their eyes get big because you're here? How important of a role is that for you guys in the department to be available, to be present?
I think it's critical. From a student is sick and they need a makeup lesson. Well, if the teacher is only there one day a week, that teacher isn't going to come in the next day or 2 days later for a makeup lesson. Basically, now that we have Zoom and people are comfortable with it, I guess the makeup lesson could be done that way. But So that's one aspect. If a student is sick and they need a makeup lesson, or if a student just simply has a question and they'll drop in, or if a student has a problem they want to talk about, I think it's critical. And also, similarly, if we have a student struggling in one class, like for example, my office is on the top floor of Butler, not too far away from the piano lab. And our the beginning piano teacher, Dr. Moulton, often comes by and says, either just visits or, how is this student doing in lessons? And I'll say, well, they're doing pretty well in lessons. She'll say, boy, they haven't been at 2 consecutive piano classes. And so then I'll get on that student lesson. So I think it's critical that we, for the good of the students, discuss amongst the faculty. So not only are we there for students to drop in, but we as a faculty develop the camaraderie and the discussions for the betterment of the students and the department and the university also. So we discuss amongst the faculty.
Especially in a music department, having the camaraderie between faculty members, especially because I know there's orchestra here, there's marching band here, there's all of these instruments are going to have to be together at some point. How important is that camaraderie that you guys have to be able to create something incredible? I mean, we call this this marching band gets a lot of praise that they do for a reason, because of all you guys working together. The orchestra gets the praise it does because of all you guys working together. How important is that camaraderie aspect between faculty to make these two and others the incredible products that they are?
Well, I think it's critical, and also kind of a related factor to that is, we're, I think, the right size of faculty in that we're not so huge that everybody just does one thing. I do something other than saxophone. That piano class teacher that I mentioned, the beginning piano class, she's also the flute teacher. Our French horn teacher teaches music history and music theory. Our director of bands that you referred to, he also teaches theory. So everybody does more than one thing, which ultimately we see almost all the students. I engage, I think, every single music student who graduates from Mansfield. And I'm guessing that almost all full-time faculty can say the same thing, that they will have engaged every music major that graduates. Maybe there's one or two that can't say that, but still, it's very much unlike the really large universities where, a full-time load would be 12 saxophone students. That's it. That's it. And so they would engage 12 students a year. So, and only adding 2 or 3 or 4 each year. So over a 4-year span, maybe 24 people. So that's quite different than all of us here engaging every music major.
The benefits of the small town school and the community aspect of school. We've alluded to it a couple of times, but obviously the current state of the U.S. and the world that we live in is chaotic. And I'm sure that it is chaotic for you guys in terms of the pandemic and trying to figure out ways to still be able to practice with everything. What has been the most challenging aspect of this you have found, the pandemic?
Well, For me personally, I guess my job really hasn't changed a whole lot. Obviously, it's I think it's impacted my students more than me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's mostly my students, and I think they mainly are kind of preoccupied with what's my future like, preoccupied with,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe family things at home, maybe a parent has lost their job, or maybe they know somebody who's sick. I guess my life hasn't been greatly impacted, but I
Mm-hmm.
do see it in my students.
I think music too, music especially, has a great way to provide an escape for a lot of people too. So have you noticed at all, like especially like you said, some of your students who might be struggling with these thoughts, but when they get into the room or they get into practice, it is time for them to just really let it go and focus on specifically what they're doing.
Yes, kind of like I alluded to before, to make a productive practice session, to basically accomplish one thing and make a plan for the next time to be that focused. But sometimes to get in that mindset of accomplishing something and planning something, sometimes it is difficult. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm just going to open up my case and get out my saxophone and just forget about the world. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they really are in a profession, and it's hard work. And as long as they approach it with, I need to accomplish something and I need to plan, and that's all I really need to do, that I hope can supply the focus.
Absolutely. One more COVID question. So I don't know if you had a chance to see this, but there are some schools down south who are still having their marching bands perform. Uh, Obviously, it is a little strange sitting in the crowd with a mask and then having to take it off. There was a shot of a saxophonist from I forget what school it was, but she was wearing her mask trying to play. I'm not crazy when I say that's not possible, right?
Well, what they do is, I didn't see that exact photo, but you can have your mask on, and they cut a little slit right where the
Okay.
mouth would be, and so their mask is still on, and then they just put the mouthpiece right into that little opening.
Okay, because I was like, there is a reed in there that you definitely need to,
Yeah.
to have access to. Yeah, I don't. I think this individual just kind of got caught not playing.
Yeah.
It happens, but I, I, I was like, I'm not crazy. That's not. You're not
Possible.
playing any music out of
There.
that. No. Okay, well, I want to get to a section here of the show here, kind of a fun way to end it. I have two questions that I've asked everyone who's been on this podcast that really have nothing to do with anything. They're just kind of a fun way to end the show here. And there's two questions. The first one is, what is your go-to meal to impress? It can be something you cook. It could be a place you go. But your go-to, when you're trying to impress someone, your go-to meal you make.
Wow. Well, first of all, my wife is an excellent cook. So we hardly ever go out. And the only meals I cook are, I do omelets every Sunday morning. I periodically do waffles. And I make her a meal on her birthday. But I guess my go-to meal would probably be those omelets, because I flip them. And that's actually the impressive part.
The joy of up in the air. I like it.
Yeah.
And then the second question I have is, by the way, I am tempted to come to your place on a Sunday to try one of those omelets. They sound really good. But the second question that I have is, so we all do more public speaking than we probably think we do. And every person has that one instance of public speaking that just went haywire, that just went crazy. And I don't need to know the entire story. I just need 3 words or phrases that describe your worst public speaking moment. For me, the example for me is high school appliances bleach. And there will be no follow-up question to this. So just a tease here at the end of the worst public speaking moment you've had, but only 3 words or phrases.
Okay. Well, I guess it'll have to be circumspect. It will be jury, memory, so jury and memory and embarrassment.
All right. And like I said, no follow-up question to that. Well, Dr. Murphy, thank you so very much for taking the time and stopping by.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for tuning in and listening. And this has been another fantastic episode of Conversations. We will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.